So the topic of today's video is how to turn quote unquote seasonal stencils into a image that you can use for this time of the year. And one of the reasons why I love stencils so much is that so often they're really kind of templates, and so you can adjust them accordingly. You can kind of play around with them in many different ways. So I wanted to share with you some ideas with a few of the more seasonal sets. I already did about 4 videos ago a huge video on the autumn impressions where we worked on using all the moths, which could be like very, like Halloweenish, and we turned them into like beautiful butterflies with words and things like that. But I still have some other sets that have seasonal names and themes, but I want to show you how you can turn them around and make them something for all year round. So one of the first ones is this set called Winter Days. I don't know if you can see it down there. And I've got this little kind of Santa figure, but he really could be just about anything. So I put a couple of him down on the paper and I traced it with my pencil. So he's on there. Maybe I'll bring the camera down ever so slightly because it's just so light. Now, this snow figure, it could be fun to do like a seasonal snowman because no one does that. Like maybe it could be a seasonal rock person. I should play and try that. But I wanted to focus on this gentleman here because so far he's my only male stencil. So I really like the idea of making him work. So I created this little conical hat because I'm really obsessed with the kind of Victorian Santas where they look kind of like St. Nicholas. So, depending on how you put this hat on, obviously, if you want to make it really Santa-ish, you could do some ruffles around the side. But as soon as you put this hat on his head, all of a sudden, he could be many different things. I'm going to lower the brim a little bit. There we go, a little better. So this hat to me, it could be very gnomish, like a garden gnome. So already that's spring and summer right there. And it also could be very, very much like a magician's hat. Okay, so if you were to put stars on here, if you doodled, and what I did is I eliminated these 2 lines because these are supposed to simulate ruffles, that you might have. But in this case, I can just leave those out and do something like this. So it looks more like a cape. So just by eliminating these 2 lines and adding this, I've now got this really cool magician looking character. And he could be, if you were to do him in purple or blue, he could be very magician looking. If you did him in green, okay, and then let's say let's say instead of putting stars on his hat, if you did him in green and put little mushrooms on the bottom of his cape, which I love doing, little mushrooms all around the bottom of his cape, and then you could do some bigger mushrooms here, right? You could keep doing mushrooms. Then all of a sudden he becomes very foresty, You could do some floral things on the side and keep doing lots of mushrooms. That sounds horrible. You know what I mean. We're drawing mushrooms, not doing them. And so all of a sudden, you know, if you were to do greens and do the mushrooms in red, then all of a sudden you've got a lot of forest kind of stuff going on. Similarly, if you were to just do flowers everywhere, then you could add flowers to his cape. Okay, and then do some flowers all around his hat. I'm just doing loose flowers. I'm horrible at drawing. So you do flowers everywhere, and then you do flowers on his cape. You've got something very summery. Summer solstice is coming, you know, the change of seasons. So that is another way to play with this stencil. So definitely magicians, or like a forest fairy, like a male forest fairy or magician, those are great ideas. My favorite one though, which again, this is super summery. I've only shared this like on the release, but it's my absolute favorite, is if you put his hat on like so, trace the rest of his face, and then literally just kind of, no, cut this about here. Okay, so we eliminated this wavy line. What I would do in this case, okay, for this, we're gonna make a garden gnome, and it's so easy, is just make the lines on the side straight instead of wavy, because he's not gonna have a cloak on. And if you just go below the beard, like, I don't know, a couple of centimeters, and then make 2 lines here, like that, and maybe just make a button. All of a sudden now you have the top of overalls. And then if you just come about halfway, you can just make a line here. And what I did, I think I did something more like this. We're you know, we're doing whimsical art here. Just loose lines. Nothing too crazy. And then, and you do 2 little round half moons here. If you make these brown, you've got boots, you've got overalls, still don't have to make hands. And you've got a little garden gnome. Like you could, you could make like plaid pants, you know, like how cute would that be? But you know, garden gnomes tend to be like red and blue, like very fun colors, right? Bright and fun. So like give him a red hat and like blue overalls and a green shirt and brown shoes. And before you know it, you have a garden gnome, right? So Santa is now a male fairy. Ooh, even if you made him a fairy, you could give him wings too, right? Male fairy or magician, you got a garden gnome. I mean, you really can play with this set. So winter days, you can do that. And then some of the other ways I like to play, oh, actually, let's do these ladies too. So these ladies are part of the sweater weather set, sweater weather. And they have hats on, okay? So, and they also come with these trees. So I thought we'd play with both because these look like pine trees. But anyway, one way to change them up is I trace them down. For this lady, instead of doing the pom-pom on the top of her hat, you can add just one of these and make it a beanie. Or if you're feeling super artsy, you can go like this. You know, you can play around with it and make it like a frumpy, like I have one, like a clutched kind of baseball cap, and put a button on top. You might want to do something like that maybe. So a couple different ways to play with the hat. My personal favorite is to just keep it simple and make it into like a little buttony hat for sure. And then instead of doing this high collar, right, come down and do a much longer, more open cut on the top of her dress. And again, like you could turn this into jewelry if you wanted, or you can just keep it the line of her dress, the collar of her dress. And so then it's more open, and then you can play with it and make it more summery, you know, like these lines. I mean, you could put those back in there, but to me, these simulate like the fur on like royalties, cloaks, you know. It's so instead of doing that again, you know, you can go in and add some summery flowers on the top, and now you have a summery flowy dress. Her hat is really already a beanie, so you don't have to do too much to it. But again, just to jazz the hats up and make them summery, you know, you can put flowers on them, and just adding that makes it look summery. And again, instead of doing this high cut, come down and do something much lower. Okay, and then you've got another kind of more summery look. Okay, so just ways to play around with these and make them less wintry. Now, my other favorite are the trees. So I shared this when I samples of when I released them, but I wanted to show you how I create these as like a summery tree. So I'm gonna take some non-traditional colors, and I'm just going to go in and just do some lines, just like that. And I'm just using watercolors, and I'm gonna pick really fun, bright colors, okay? And just kind of layer them on here. I just think this looks so spectacular when it's all done. I just love how it turns out. So just pick a handful. You don't want to go too crazy. I mean, you could. You really could make it as crazy as you want. And I'm doing this with watercolors. So other options obviously are like, oh, you know, you could jazz it up with your paint pens or acrylics. But I'm just picking some kind of cool gem tones, kind of summery, and I'm just kind of popping them in. And then when it's done, you have this beautiful, colorful tree. This looks incredible for this summer, for sure. Like, I just love it so much. And then another option is to take it and it's supposed to be pink, but I got yellow on my brush. This might come out a little bleedy because I'm not being careful with the water here. So I'm making this really pink. You can't really tell in the video, but so we'll let that dry and come back to it because I have ideas for that. So let me just show you some of the other shapes. So I just want this to dry real quick. It's still wet, but obviously you could just keep playing with this in a million ways. You could do patterns, you know, like maybe I'll do one more before I do the other one real quick. I think I'll do one over here. Got this, it's supposed to be blue, but I still have pink on my brush. So you could do stripes. Sorry, I was totally off frame for that. You could do stripes here. You could do polka dots. There's like a million ways to play with the tree stencils, because honestly, when you look at it like this, there's really two generic tree shapes. There's one that looks round like an oak or apple looking tree, or this kind of pointy tree. So you can really make them any way you want. You could also, now I'm going off on a tangent. Hold on. I want to make sure I'm in frame because somebody's going to comment on that. Another fun way to go if you're doing fall is do some gradient colors for the fall. And then you have like a fall colored tree. So again, there's just a million ways to play. So I have one other idea, but we'll come back to it. Now this one is called Harvest Fun. And I have two crows on here, but sometimes people get hung up on what things are and don't think, oh, I could change that around. So even though, I'm going to do it this way, even though this is a crow shape, right? Who says you have to make it a crow, right? Because once you play around with your colors, okay, I'm gonna once you play around with colors, they become something else entirely. So if you do blue on your watercolor stencil shape, all of a sudden now it looks kind of like a bluebird, you know? Same thing with this guy. I'm trying to think of some of the other famous colors for birds in the summer. Let's make them a goldfinch shape. So, you know, in this case, we're not trying to be super accurate. We're taking these generic bird shapes, even though when you paint them black, immediately it says crow. But if you add a couple of things in here, all of a sudden, you know, they could become something else, right? So, I mean, that doesn't look super goldfinchy, but it doesn't look like a crow anymore. So if you change the colors, is my point, then you've got some really cool alternatives for your fall shapes. And then one of my other favorite ones to play with are my waves. So if you were to take this and do it in white, all of a sudden you have a big snowy squall kind of shape. And if you take this, okay, and you do it in green, this is probably not the best one to show you, but if you do it in green and you're creating some garden scene, you can actually, put some horrible at making freehand flowers like real fast. You can start playing with layering flowers and things like that. So instead of me drawing one, you could add some flowers and all of a sudden you've got a beautiful background for a spring or a summer spread. Maybe even you could put your little gnome in there. And I have two different, so like the same thing for the solid wave, if you do that in green or yellow, you get like a summer or fall look. In fact, I have this book here, I'll show you how it turns out. So here I did it in green, but I made an entire summer scene. Here's another one, okay? Entire summer scene. This is like the wavy coral, right, that comes on the wave sheet, but if you do it in another color, you can add flowers to it. It looks gardeny, okay? So just another option. But one thing I wanted to show you about these trees also, if you were to do them in solid colors, because there's so much that's wide open, you can then come in and use them as a place for words, right? So you can do journaling on the actual trees. So it could be just a fun space to put on a journal page. And then you can create lines or just put big bold words on there. And then you can use that as a space for writing. You can also use like a big bold tree. I'm trying to write "Summer Trees Make Me Feel Fine," like this song. Hold on. I can't help myself. Okay, I'm like the dad joke queen. Here we go. Summer trees. Okay. But another option is if you have this space, you can go in and draw on here or add like a cute Tim Holtz like mini paper doll figure or a photo. So these to me are just another space to add things on. Same thing with like the wave, you could go through and just add clusters of flowers around it. So I hope I gave you some fun ideas on how to play with these stencils and add some extra bits and pieces to them and turn them around. So if you've purchased the wave set or the sweater weather or the winter days sets, you can still play with them throughout the year and just really have fun. So I'm going to keep playing, and I'll probably post some samples on my Instagram. And sorry I was off camera for a minute there with my stripy tree. But hopefully I give you some ideas, and again, I'll be back and keep sharing more with you.